Today we have to talk about the season awards for the 2023 season for the Gophers football team, and then we're diving in with Eric over at JR Allstar to talk about the women's basketball team and also their matchup with Caitlin Clark.
You are Locked On Golden Gophers.
No matter what we're going to do here, we're just going to keep rowing.
Your daily podcast on the Minnesota Golden Gophers.
However it turns out, we're just going to keep rowing.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
We're just going to keep rowing, and keep rowing.
You're listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name's Kane Rob, host of the podcast, former collegiate football video coordinator, and recruiting assistant, here to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day of the week, Monday through Friday. Now, we recovered and we recapped about that bowl game victory against Bowling Green, but let's talk about the whole year. Let's talk about the season awards for the players in the 2023 season. This is going to be a fun one, and then we're going to kick it over to women's basketball because they're taking on one of the best teams and one of the best players in the entire country, and Caitlin Clark and the Iowa Hawkeyes. Can they pull the upset? We're going to dive in deep in later segments of this show, but let's kick it off with those season awards. If you want to hear Gophers talk each and every day, be sure to hit subscribe, hit like, leave a comment on your favorite thoughts on season awards down and below in the comments over on YouTube. But let's talk about most improved player on this season, in my opinion, and that was Ja Joyner. Now, I mentioned in the postcast after the bowl game and also on yesterday's show that his jump was tremendous in this past season. Now, he jumped from 1.5 sacks to 7.5 sacks, and he was able to get home on those pressures. He was a pressure monster in that 2022 season, but he got home and actually created the sacks in 2023, and hopefully there's nowhere to go but up. Now, on top of that, he also forced 2 fumbles on the season, and I believe he is just scratching the surface. So it's time to get excited about Ja Joyner, who was definitely the most improved player in my eyes. You move on over to biggest surprise, and the biggest surprise for the Gophers in 2023 was Jordan Newben. Now, Jordan Newben went from 5th string running back to 204 rushing yards in a single game against Michigan State. The Jordan Newben game indeed. On top of that, he averaged 4.4 yards per carry, 559 total rush yards on the season with 3 touchdowns. And then in 7 games that he played as a running back for this team, he had 4 games where he had 75 or more rushing yards in that single game. He only saw above 20 carries in 2 different games this season, so that shows you he can be very effective with a limited touches, a limited amount of carries moving forward. So that should allow him to still thrive being the running back 2, running back 3 in the next season. Now, on top of that, he's a patient runner with good vision, and that showed on the season. And on top of that, there is just something in the water in that Newben household, because those players, Tyler Newben, Jordan Newben, they just rise to the occasion at all times. They always rise to the occasion. So definitely the biggest surprise was Jordan Newben. Now, the most impactful transfer this season, in my eyes, it was a tough one. It was a tight race between Tre'Von Jones and Jack Henderson, but I think Trey Jones pulled out the victory for this award. He was tied for second on the team in tackles, tied with none other than Tyler Newben with 53 tackles on the season. Also had a sack, 2 interceptions, and 8 pass breakups. And that's what the difference was for me, is just how draped in coverage he was on the receivers throughout the conference. Played really well throughout the season, pretty consistent throughout the season. And I would not be surprised for him to get some league looks in maybe the later rounds or a UDFA with a good pro day. I think Trey Jones has put his name into the conversation to play on Sundays. Now you move to the best coaching addition, and I've got to give it to Winston Delatibadier. Now, on top of that, Nick McKissick-Luke, Nick Monroe, both of them did great jobs, but Winston Delatibadier took this defensive line that struggled the year prior, and he took them up to take a step up in the sacks department in 2023. The pressures seemed to be more consistent for most of the season. The position had more juice and swagger about it. And on top of that, you saw growth from many guys within the position group. You saw it from Ja Joyner. You saw it from Anthony Smith, Devin Eastern, Danny Strigout, Jalen Logan Redding, and it keeps going on. There were a lot of development, and on top of that, there were some recruiting wins on that defensive line position. So overall, I'm going to give him the tip of the cap for the best coaching addition. You move it on over to Rose to the Occasion. This is a fun award, in my opinion, and that player who won this one was Maverick Baranowski. Now, he was leading the team in tackles prior to his injury, where he got injured early on in the Purdue game. So that basically means he missed almost the final 4 games of the season, basically 3 3/4 games Maverick Baranowski missed, and yet he still finished 3rd on the team in tackles with 52 tackles, just 1 tackle behind Trey Jones and Tyler Nubin, who were 2nd on the team. And that's missing the Ohio State game, the Wisconsin game, the bowl game, and most of the Purdue game. Now, he wasn't even supposed to be the starter this season, but he stepped in for an injured Cody Lindenberg. And yes, he had some growing pains throughout, but he grew throughout the entire season, and it was very impressive. I look forward to him being a feature piece for this defense moving forward. Now, you go to biggest sleeper, and in my eyes, it's Devin Eastern. I still don't think he gets enough credit for how much of an impact he has on that defensive line. 28 tackles, 1 pass deflection, but it was a big year for growing his confidence. You could just see that he knows he's built for it. He knows he can step up and play with anybody in the Big Ten this season, and it was a great thing to see. Now, on top of that, there were a lot of big moments that don't show in the box score, but he was constantly creating pressures up the middle that helped drive the quarterback into his teammates for sacks. Kyler Baugh got a couple of sacks from the pressure that Eastern created. Some of the guys on the outside, Strigout, Joyner, they benefited off of the pressures that Devin Eastern committed up the middle. And now with Kyler Baugh being gone, he's going to be the big leader in that interior for the next season. So I think a bigger year is coming for him. You move to most underrated player. I'm going with Jack Henderson. His presence and his grit showed on the field throughout the entire season. Quality player, but on top of that, he quietly led the team in tackles. He was number 1 on the entire Gophers defense in tackles this season with 59 tackles. He also had a sack, 2 interceptions, and 1 pass breakup, and he graded well on PFF throughout the season. So I think he's going to be a staple on this defense moving forward, especially in that nickel corner role. But I think he has embraced it, and now he's going to look to take it even further. He stood out in the spring, he stood out in the fall camp, and he went on to lead the team in tackles, even though it was his first year within the system. I'm excited for Jack Henderson moving forward as the most underrated in 2023. Now let's move it to most impressive, and I couldn't put anybody else besides Darius Taylor. He led the Big Ten in rushing for multiple weeks, even when he went down due to injury, and he was incredible in that 4-game output that he had in the middle of the season prior to the injury. Now, on top of that, he averaged 133 yards per game in the 6 games that he played, which would have led the Big Ten by a landslide, like a country mile. I'm not even kidding you. The leader in the Big Ten was 95 yards per game in Tre'Von Henderson. Like I said, Darius Taylor had 133 yards per game. Now, Tre'Von Henderson did it in 9 games, so he only played 3 more games than what Darius saw in this season. So Darius Taylor is the most impressive by far and away, in my opinion. And even in the 6 games that he did play in, he was a top 10 rusher in yards across the conference, even in 6 games. I don't know how you're not impressed with that. Definitely most impressive for me. Now, most dependable player for the Gophers was Dragan Kesich. He won the Big Ten Kicker of the Year. He never missed an extra point all year, and he was 85% on his field goal attempts this season. He had a long of 54, some big-time clutch kicks, and he was 47 of 56 on touchbacks from kickoffs as well, which is at 84%, which was one of the best in the country. Dragan Kesich, this was his first year as that starting kicker role, and he made it worth it. And I look forward to seeing what he does in 2024 moving forward. Now let's close it out with an offensive MVP, a defensive MVP, a newbie of the year, and team MVP. Now, offensive MVP, I got to give it to Daniel Jackson. He led the team in receiving yards, receptions, receiving touchdowns, and total touchdowns for the entire Gophers program. And he was top 4 in the conference in receiving yards, in receptions, and in receiving touchdowns. He had the amazing toe drag swag touchdown to kick off the year, and it never slowed down. And that was with the detriment of QB play at times, especially in this bowl game that we just watched. But Daniel Jackson found a way to get it done. And when he comes back next season, he's going to find his way into the top 10 receiving yards leaders in the entire program. We'll see where he finishes on that list, but he was definitely the offensive MVP of 2023. Now we flip it to the defensive MVP, and you've got to give it to Tyler Nubin. He broke the all-time interception program record. He was second on the team in tackles, 4 pass breakups, 5 interceptions, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery, 1 sack, and he was the heart and soul of this defense. He's going to be an NFL player real soon here, first or second round guy, guaranteed. Tyler Nubin was the defensive MVP and also my vote for the team MVP. He was the focal point of this team, and I don't think you can make a case for anybody else. I'm sorry, but he locked it down. And then newbie of the year, Darius Taylor, had to give it to him. We haven't seen someone step up as a true freshman like that in quite a number of years. Now, I'm not saying it hasn't happened, but it has happened now with Darius Taylor, and the bowl game was just a glimpse of what is to come next season as well. So that's our season awards for this season. I hope you enjoyed it, but we're going to move on to some women's basketball talk, because can the Gophers upset Caitlin Clark, and how are they doing so far? How is the new coaching staff coming off against top recruits in the country? We're going to talk about all that and more coming up next. First, I got to talk to you about our friends over at Gametime, because Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind when you are making a purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what you are getting and what to expect when you arrive. On top of that, they have all-in prices to show your total upfront, so you know you're getting a great deal without hidden fees. And then finally, you can buy the tickets within seconds with just a few taps. So you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app and create an account and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms and conditions apply, but create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first order. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Here to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day of the week, and we are joined by Eric from JR Allstar. We're going to talk all things Gophers women's basketball today. Eric, thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely, thank you for having me again.
Absolutely. This shouldn't be well, this is the second time. It's not the first, but it won't be the last, I'm sure. But let's jump into this Gophers women's basketball talk now. Overall, they've finished the non-conference season, and Minnesota is 11-1 so far. Now, yes, they've had a couple layup games in there with like Chicago State, Cal State Northridge, and Lindenwood that are lower in the net rankings. But there are 2 things with that, in my opinion. They've dominated in those games by like 50-plus points. And you have a new coaching staff with 10 players that are sophomores or younger. And those are the games where you can really try things out and lock in on the details and really get those implementation of concepts. Now, but you look past that, you have Norfolk State first in the MEAC. You have Kentucky, who's a high major team. Stony Brook, who's first in the CAA. Drake, who's first in the Mountain Valley Conference. Purdue, who is an in-conference win. So they have quality wins as well. So what are your thoughts with this Minnesota team and how they have kicked off the season so far with this schedule?
What I would say is they did basically what you need to do. I mean, in terms of your non-conference, you can only, the games that are ahead of you with, especially this staff, they were given the schedule. So when you look at that, you just kind of got to go out there and do what you can. And I even say in every aspect, I feel like they've either exceeded or met expectation. Even the UConn game, that very easily could have been, in typical UConn fashion, could have been a blowout. If you'd have told me you're having 23 points at halftime, I would have assumed you could have been down 30. You were down 3. And that shows how far your defense has come. And like I said, the Kentucky game you mentioned, that's the only one you've had on the road. And even it showed we can play, be down 2 at half and then just really adjust and really hit the ground running, which helps. The Drake game, that Drake is an excellent team. They likely will be either winning or right there fighting for their conference title. And it's a different style, but it's a style that will help you come the Big Ten, a 5-out style. So when you're playing, as we'll speak to, Caitlin Clark or Illinois or those type of games where the teams like to spread you out, you have that you have that ability to kind of know how to handle those.
Absolutely. I'm definitely there with you. And I think Coach Plitzuweit has mentioned that in a couple of the pressers too, of just how each opponent that they're playing, even though it might not be some name that jumps off the page to most common fans, they all play different styles of basketball, which will prep him for the Big Ten schedule or for making any sort of postseason runs because they're seeing those different styles of play. So you hit that on the head. But I'm curious, what are your initial thoughts on Coach Plitzuweit so far, and how, I guess, things you've seen that you've liked, and is there anything overall that you would like to see more from Coach Plitzuweit?
Quote my battle, Donnie P. I've loved everything we've seen from Don because you could see, having been to practice and stuff too, they made the mentality of we're ride or die with our defense. We're going to lock on in that end. And they even understood, they're like, because they're going to play so hard on defense, the offense may take a little bit longer to catch up because they're going to be exhausted from how hard they play on defense. And she got this group to buy in day one. You look at recruiting wins with AJ and Grace, both coming in, both have played big roles. Grace, a starter in contention for Big Ten Freshman of the Year, in my opinion. I would say she's kind of up there. And then you just look at her ability to connect with the ones that were here. She knew what Mallory and Amaya and Mara brought. And then you add Sophie, and she kind of just knows the continuity. Everyone knows exactly what she expects. She doesn't sugarcoat it. When you step into practice, she's expecting 100% of the time. And that has been so impressive. Nothing I really would even say see more of. I have liked that in games when she can, we get to the bench. And even that, she's holding every bench player to the same standard she holds Mara Braun, your best player, to. When they're going in there, she's saying, I don't care if we're up 40 or 50. You are going to run the plays, and if you're not, you're going to sit on the bench next to me. So all positives here for Coach Donnie P. I'm hoping, like I said, she has really grabbed her hooks in the program early, and I'm excited to see what she can do with it.
Yeah, I think that it's been very nice to see not only winning, but just like the mentality of this team and the grit and the scrappiness and how hard they play. I definitely think you can see the identity of that team. And so that's one question I had for you is, what are you thinking are the strengths of this Gopher team, and what, in your opinion, is their identity?
To me, their identity, first and foremost, starts with they're going to be tough on defense. I've had it explained, and I like how it's explained in terms of, I don't know if the Gophers are going to have a single individual player on the all-defensive team, but I think they're going to be a top 4 defensive team as a team in the conference. That they're just so team-oriented on that, especially when you look at like those UConn and Drake games. I think a lot of teams really thought they could take advantage of, say, Grace or Sophie, and they can't, because the help side is always there. They're sticking with their matchup. The ability to communicate, you're hearing it even from us in the stands, in packed crowd, you're hearing Mara and Amaya loudly holler switch. Same with Mal. I like, Grace, and I think, they've done a lot of where 2 through 4 has been interchangeable, Mal, Mara, and Grace. And I think a lot of you are trying to like get to one of them. And it's like, they all are so good at locking down on their defense, but they move well. Everyone's helping. And then I would say you have a versatility of scoring. Mara Braun's going to get hers. Everyone's going to focus on Mara Braun. But I think you even see Grace and Mal are outstanding 3-point shooters. Amaya now, I think, found that perfect balance of knowing when to look for her shot, when to pass it off. Last year at times, I think she kind of struggled with, I should do one or the other more, and then that game is what she was choosing to do. She's done really good about knowing I can do them both. I think Sophie has been such a godsend for this team because she knows when it's her turn to look for a shot, to get rebounds. She does a really good job of kind of having that backdoor, like she's finding Mal on backdoor cuts, bring her to the high post, and just dropping down to Mal or Grace cutting. So I said versatile. You can go fight, I would say we're still working on some depth, but I would say a defensive team with a lot of offensive versatility, and that's especially in that starting 5.
It's funny that you say that. I wrote down my own thoughts just to see where I was at and how similar we were. And I said defense, hustle, and scoring versatility. So I think we're step for step right there. Now, before we talk about one of your favorites, I definitely got to ask you, you're super tapped in to the Minnesota and Midwest high school hoops. So how have you seen this Gopher staff being received thus far to your knowledge?
I've heard nothing but positives, and that is not hasn't always been the case. I've heard a lot of, and it's coming from the big names in the state. What I would tell people in terms of Gopher fans, the 26 class, the 27 class, and 28. And I know we're getting real young there because it's like 10th graders, 9th graders, and 8th graders. So we got a while, Gopher fans. But in those three classes, they are sitting very well in terms of those top 2, 3 in that class. They've made the contact, they've made the effort, they went to their games. And they're really starting to get the eyes on them when you couple, because a lot of people can have pretty words, and that's great. But this staff is kind of walking the walk and talking the talk. Donnie, I've seen her out at multiple different ones. And the only problem is with those classes is they come in as Mara, Amaya, Amal, and Sophie all leave. Mm-hmm. But you kind of need someone to replace that talent. So I said that's what I would say. They have their attention. There are a lot of, I would say they're even maybe early on the favorites for some of those, especially 27, 28, the favorites to land those in-state kids that are nationally rated. So keep doing this. The conference, a lot of people are everyone's saying like, we'll see what happens in the Big Ten conference. I'm like, It's a fair assessment, but the recruiting has really, I said, everyone loves this staff. Everyone's liking, they're all liking where the direction is going. So I think it's all on the up and up for this staff.
Awesome. Well, before we turn to Iowa, which is going to be the matchup to definitely give us another test since UConn, but overall, we got to talk about your girl, the Braun Mamba. So far, over the last 5 games, she seems to be catching fire. 33 points, 25 points, 21 points, 26 points, 21 points. She's hooping. And so she's also averaging 4.2 rebounds and second on the team in assists with 3.3, second on the team in steals. So she is definitely do-it-all player for the Gophers and very consistent, 40% from the three-point line and 95% from the free throw line. So overall, I think she's just starting to scratch the surface. But what do you think her ceiling could be over the course of her career?
I'm someone that hopes Caitlin Clark goes to the WNBA draft because I think Mara Braun could ascend to Big Ten Player of the Year, that level, as long as there isn't Caitlin Clark kind of hoovering over the conference. But when you talk about Mara, where she's stepped up, she said, because of her Team USA experience, and you can see it, her release is even quicker this year, especially when you look at that Drake and Penn State game, or not Penn State, Purdue. They had defenders right on her, and she's hitting contested threes because she's getting it off so quick before they can maybe get a hand to contest it. That was huge. Her defense, the UConn game, you saw in her eyes, excuse me, that she wanted Paige. She wanted that matchup, and that was huge. Excuse me. Choking on my own gum here. Yeah, so she has Player of the Year written all over her. It's just, now we're in conference. Can she keep it going?
Yeah, no, awesome. And I think that's what we're going to start to talk about next. We got to talk about this big conference game to kick off the conference schedule for the Gophers. And I want to hone in on that major matchup of Minnesota coming up this weekend versus Caitlin Clark and the number 4 Hawkeyes. That's what's coming up next. All right, Gophers fans, let's talk about our friends over at FanDuel because right now new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any $5 winning money line bet. All you got to do is go out there and find your favorite game, the one where just deep down inside in your gut and your soul that this is going to be a W. If you think it's Michigan against Bama, then go ahead and lock that one in. If you think it's LSU versus Wisconsin, go ahead and lock that one in. Whatever your key, easy win, guaranteed. Go on, put a $5 bet down, and you will get $150 in bonus bets if your team wins. So go to FanDuel.com/LockedOnCollege. Again, that's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Correction there. FanDuel.com/LockedOn. And you can have so much fun with that FanDuel app, including it being super easy to use, safe and secure, but you can bet on spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more. You can look at Heisman races, MVP races, and so much more. Even coaches getting fired. That's right. Go check it out at FanDuel.com/LockedOn today. All right, we are back and we're talking Gophers as they take on the number 4 Iowa Hawkeyes on the road at Carver Hawkeye, and it's on December 30th. Now, Iowa has only lost one game so far this season to Kansas State, who has been one of the best defensive teams in the country in that they held Iowa to 58 points, Caitlin Clark to 28 or 24 points, 3 assists and 4 turnovers. Now, Iowa got some revenge when they played them in the second time through. But you look at Minnesota, who is currently 30th in the country in opponent points per game. They're top 10 in the high majors, and they're first in the Big Ten when it comes to opponent points per game. So you can possibly maybe start to see a formula of a potential upset. But what, in your opinion, can slow this Hawkeye team down?
Well, the one thing is going to be mental in terms of Caitlin's going to be Caitlin. She's going to have those moments, especially in Carver Hawkeye. She's going to have moments where that place is rocking. She's going to hit those, especially if it's like in a close game, she's going to hit those big transition long threes, and that's going to get the place nuts. Those moments you have to kind of like at least ride out, but don't let it turn in from maybe cut it off at a 6-0 run instead of a 16-0 run.
Right.
Don't let them kind of get out running, because when she's has an open floor, she's going to hit Stelke. She's going to hit her guard, and then they're rolling. And then you're kind of feel like it's an avalanche. So my thing is with her, a lot of people say, just let her go off and stop the rest. I mean, granted, as hard it is to stop Caitlin, I like the matchup that we have in terms of we are tall all over. Our starting 5, I think Amaya is the smallest, and they say 5'11", probably tiptoeing 6 foot. I mean, to me, if you look at Iowa, they're going to have a smaller guard defending either Mallory Hire, Grace, or Mara. Those are all over 6 foot. I would post up whoever has maybe Gabby Marshall, post them up. She's small. Now they're going to send help, but then you have Mara open or Mal open, and then you're opening up threes. I think you have to have Sophie kind of establish herself, kind of like Kansas State. They had Lee, who really kind of forced them to kind of sag in and maybe leave the Kansas State shooters open. Sophie's going to have to be a valid scoring option where Iowa can't just say, well, we're just going to leave her alone or even risk her hurting us. I said I like their defense. It's going to be challenged, like I said, to the level of maybe how UConn challenged them. But like I said, we saw that they can rise up to that. UConn, even though they won by 18, you look at it, if you take away that third quarter, they outscored the Gophers in the first, second, and fourth combined by 3. And they made people like Paige and them really have to work hard for their shots. The best thing you can do for Caitlin is hope that she may be going to miss. I mean, but just get a hand up in her. I like I'm hesitant to say put Mara on her to start. I like the size that Mara brings on her. I'm nervous that could get Mara in foul trouble, and there goes your leading scorer. And you might need Mara to kind of keep, at least scoring wise, you're going to have to score with Iowa. Likely this game is going to be in the 80s. You're going to have to kind of stay up with them. Maybe, if your defense can hold in the 70s, that'd be great. Low 60s, even better. So that's why I say maybe go Amaya first on her, more physical, and have Mara kind of roaming off the ball, and then maybe having her on Kate Martin or Gabby Marshall, I would say.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I want to kind of transition with that because I think you said mine. So who would you say is the key player or the X factor for Minnesota versus Iowa? Who could be that game changer? For me, it's Sophie Hart, like you said, because I think that she just brings that difference in interior presence. And there's nobody else on this roster that can really do that, but there's really nobody on that Iowa roster who can match up with her step for step in the post, in my opinion. But who do you think is more of that X factor, or maybe the person who could be the game changer for this one for Minnesota?
I think it's going to be Mallory Hire in terms of, because like you said with Stalky, she's really their best side. Now they think they have Addison O'Grady, and they have, I think Addison O'Grady's the other one, and she has size. But for the majority of the time, it's going to be Stalky's your main, like kind of like Aaliyah Edwards was for UConn, but it's going to be your main post. And so if you make her choose, if she goes on Sophie, Mal's going to have a guard on her. And Mal's already shown she can hit the 3. She is a rebound machine.
Yeah.
And so if then they switch Stalky, then Sophie has a mismatch. So I think if Mallory's hitting inside, doing her backdoor cut, fighting for rebounds, Iowa has to make the decision of like, are we going to live with her hurting us? And she's shown she can. Last year, look at the Wisconsin game, 5 threes, 28 points. This year, she showed she just picks her spots, but her 3 looks smoother. She's more, you saw in the UConn game, she was attacking like up and under. She's shown, Drake, I think she had a step back jumper. Mallory's who I think, like, I don't know if Iowa has a really good matchup for her, unless you're pulling Stalky off of Sophie. and then you don't have a good matchup for so long.
Right.
My thing is that's going to probably be, and if honestly they decide to take them two away, Grace is going to be open. And I'll live with Grace or Mal getting open looks. I'll live with those decisions.
Absolutely. No, I'm 100% with you. I'm curious on your thoughts on this too. With that UConn game, it felt like the Gophers wanted to be so good because they knew they were in that game, but they started off so cold, and I feel like they put almost too much pressure on themselves. Could you see it going that way again in Iowa, or do you think having played that UConn game, maybe they've learned a little bit from that? And I guess it's a little harder too because it's on the road, but I'm curious on your thoughts there.
That's what I was thinking too. I'm guessing if I had to be a betting man or a guessing man, if they're gonna get Iowa, I think they do it in the barn. I think that's kind of your home comfort or maybe a Big Ten tournament. Have to worry about Caitlin getting you a second time after that. But I think this one, and maybe not necessarily, like I said, I agree with the UConn. I think they wanted it so bad, and these players want to prove so bad that they are improved and better that sometimes it kind of you almost want it too much. Where I would say it's different is a lot of what I saw in UConn was with the offense, because they were working so hard on defense. Those shots were a little short. But I told many people what Grace and Mal got in that game, I will live with 100 times out of 100 times.
Right.
Also, because I said, if you're going to pull defensive pressure off of Mara, you got to take those shots. Because they're going to, at least for a little bit, teams were going to live with Grace and Mallory shooting. Now they might not be as much. They might even live with Amaya shooting, which she's also shown she can hit it. So that's my thing. I think down in Carver Hawkeye, I'm hoping just like show you're competitive. I want kind of the same thing I had for expectations for UConn. Make a run at them. Make them feel you. Almost make them take a timeout, like quiet the crowd to where they're like, whoa, they're for real.
Right.
I think that February one, after you've had a whole conference season, you have a packed barn coming in there. I think that that's the one where you could maybe get her. I think because that's one, especially if they're maybe even clinch their top overall seed, maybe they don't have much of a fight in them, and you still want, at least in terms of NCAA tournament, Gophers still need to get one of those, I guess, resume builders, resume clinchers of like an Iowa, Ohio State, Maryland. And why not get it in front of a packed house that late towards the tournament when the NCAA tournaments are watching everything like that?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And I think that this one could be a really big game. Even if they don't pull this one off, if they can keep it close, I think that could hopefully, fingers crossed, spark some more interest in getting the attendance up at the barn, because this team deserves it. And they're about to go through a gauntlet these next 6 games. So they have Iowa, who is 7th in net rankings coming up. Then they have Maryland, who's 39th, Michigan, who's 38th, Nebraska, who's 21st, Indiana, who's 17th, and Michigan State, who's 16th. That's 6 games with all top 40 teams. So all those people saying, well, they haven't really played anyone, they're about to play some people. And if you want to be there to witness this team that I think can pull off some games in that schedule, you should absolutely start getting your tickets, but also support them to get them that home crowd advantage and be able to inspire them in those low points. So I think that hopefully will help really light the fire under this fan base. But I'm curious on your thoughts on that. Hearing those next 6 games, what do you think would be your prediction on a realistic outcome of what their record could be after those 6 games? How do they finish in those 6 games?
I think I'm going to go super optimistic. I'm going to say 3-3, because one of the things I think you need, like I think the Gophers need to understand, is that Big Ten middle is going to be packed. I think I look at Rutgers and Northwestern and Wisconsin, expecting maybe to be in that bottom 4, so maybe those aren't as great. 4 games total against those 3, but that middle of like Nebraska, Michigan State, Michigan, Purdue, Minnesota, Penn State, Illinois now, that's really bunched up, and so those head-to-head matchups are huge. That's why I look at the Purdue one. That's your only matchup with Purdue, and you have that tiebreaker now. That's a big tiebreaker to have.
Right.
In that 6 games you mentioned at Michigan, only time you're playing Michigan, that's a tiebreaker you're going to want to have to kind of have that. Michigan State and Nebraska, I'm guessing you play them twice. I could see you split. I could see you win both. I said the Clark one, I like their chances with Maryland, because I think Maryland's super athletic, but to me, Maryland's a not as dangerous shooting Drake team. They're athletic, but if your team defense is locked in like we've seen it can be, I think you could get Maryland and kind of maybe force them to beat you from the outside. Nebraska, it kind of depends. I think a lot of Big Ten teams have looked really good at times, and some have looked like they're beatable at times. So it kind of depends on who shows up. Likely, you're going to want to win your home games. I think at Michigan is winnable. I think at Michigan State, at Nebraska, those are winnable. So I'll go 3-3 in that 6-game stand.
I love to hear it. I mean, even looking at it, if we went 3-3 in those 6 games, I would be a happy camper, especially knowing that hopefully the load will lighten a little bit more, but also your players will be playing with more confidence moving into those next few matchups. Now, the final thing I want to ask you before we wrap this one up is I want you to call your shot. Do you think that this Minnesota team within the next, let's say by the end of January, can find its way into the top 25 rankings, even just for a week at a time, sometime in that time frame?
I'm going to say yes. I think because one of the hardest things to do when you're a team that's kind of been down for a few years is to almost get the attention back. You almost have to kind of go above and beyond to get the attention back. Showing that they went up, now I think it was like 2 votes, 4 votes, now 8 votes in the latest one. You have the attention back a little bit. I still say I'll go to my soapbox here. I think Mara Braun is criminally underrated in national conversations. I don't know how she's completely left off a lot of those, but that's just my own soapbox. But I think you can. I mean, if you go into Iowa and you lose by 5 or less at Iowa, that makes a big statement when you're saying, hey, they have to come to our house. And I always say home court's worth 3 to 7 points just based on home court, comfortability. If you're within 5, a single-digit loss to Iowa on the road, big. If you get that at Michigan, if you get Maryland at home, none of those 6 are going to be viewed as bad losses. And so you only kind of have upside of if you win them, it's all looked at good wins and none are bad losses. So, I mean, if you would find a way to go 4-2 in that and be like competitive in the Iowa game, maybe the other one, maybe lose maybe Maryland or Michigan State or something in there, be competitive in those. Absolutely, you could find your way to 25th and higher.
I'm with you. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that they can make it happen. But even more so, I'm hoping that Gophers fans will start to fill the barn for them. Thank you so much, Eric, for joining us today. And I think you are probably just as excited as I am to see what the game plan is against Iowa for Coach Dawn Plitz-White, because she is just a master when it comes to scheming up game plans. So I'm super excited for it, and I thank you for joining us here. We'll definitely have you back, but that's going to do it for us on today's show. You're going to want to tap in next week, where we definitely cover the results of that Iowa game and more here at Locked On Golden Gophers.
Thank you.